We thought the universe was big. That was the comforting lie. But what we're seeing now is something else entirely. Something so vast it breaks the mental shortcuts we've relied on since childhood. Light that shouldn't still be travelling. Galaxies that should not exist yet. Structures so early, so massive. They rewrite the opening chapters of reality. The James Webb Space Telescope didn't just look farther than anything before it. It looked back and caught the universe cheating. And once you see what Webb is showing us, you don't just update a number, you lose your sense of scale permanently. We start somewhere familiar, your night sky, a dark stretch above your head that feels infinite until you remember it isn't. We grew up with the idea that the universe has an edge in time, a beginning, and that if we build powerful enough eyes, we can trace everything back to that first moment. Hubble gave us that confidence. It showed us galaxies as they were billions of years ago, smaller, messier, still figuring themselves out. The story felt clean. The universe began hot and simple, then slowly assembled complexity like a city growing outward, brick by brick. James Webb was supposed to sharpen that picture. Better resolution, older light, higher contrast, same story, just clearer. That is not what happened. When Webb opened its eye, it didn't find a universe gently waking up. It found a universe already standing massive, organized, alarmingly mature at a time when it should barely have been able to form atoms, let alone galaxies with structure, rotation, and weight. We expected cosmic infants. What we found looked disturbingly like adults. To understand why that matters, we need to feel time the way the universe does. Light is not just illumination, it's a message in transit. Every photon you see has been travelling for a while from the sun, 8 minutes, from the nearest star, over 4 years. When Webb looks deep into space, it's not just looking far away, it's looking backward, billions of years backward, toward an era when the universe was only a few 100 million years old, less than 3% of its current age. That era was supposed to be simple. Gravity had only just begun pulling matter together. Stars were rare. Galaxies were small, faint, chaotic. Heavy elements barely existed. This was the cosmic dawn, the universe's first flicker of light after the long darkness following the Big Bang. Instead, Webb saw galaxies that were too bright, too massive, too organized. Some of them appear to contain as many stars as the Milky Way, a galaxy that took over 13 billion years to assemble. Yet they're showing up when the universe was only a few 100 million years old. Imagine finding a fully formed city buried beneath the foundations of civilization itself. Roads, towers, neighborhoods all already there before history supposedly began. That's the moment the scale problem starts. Because if galaxies like these exist that early, then either they formed impossibly fast, or the volume of the universe we can see is hiding something much larger behind it. We've always talked about the observable universe as if it were the universe, a sphere about 93 billion light-years across, defined by how far light has had time to travel since the beginning. It felt abstract, but manageable. Big, yes, but finite. Something you could put a number on. Webb quietly reminds us that this sphere is not a boundary, it's a horizon. And horizons lie. If the early universe is already packed with massive galaxies, that means density wasn't low, matter wasn't scarce, space wasn't empty, which implies that beyond our observable edge, the same process was happening and had been happening everywhere. Not just more universe, but vastly more than our mental models ever needed to account for. We are not looking at a rare patch. We are looking at a sample, and samples imply scale. Think of standing on a beach and scooping up a single handful of sand. If that handful contains thousands of grains, you don't conclude the beach is small. You conclude the opposite. You infer an overwhelming abundance beyond what you can hold. Webb's deep fields are that handful, and they are crowded. Every tiny smudge in those images is a galaxy. Not a star, a galaxy. Each one containing billions of stars, and Webb sees them stacked behind one another, layer after layer, fading not into emptiness but into more structure. The deeper it looks, the less empty space seems to exist. This is where intuition breaks. We like to imagine space as mostly nothing, with islands of matter sprinkled through it. But what Webb is showing us feels more like a cosmic city at night lights everywhere you look, stretching in every direction, with no obvious edge. Darkness not as emptiness, but as distance. Now bring the human frame back in. Every atom in your body was forged inside stars that lived and died long after those early galaxies formed, which means that before the ingredients for life even existed, the universe was already building structures on scales that dwarf our entire cosmic history. Our story doesn't begin early, it begins late. So late that the universe had already been busy for billions of years before anything like us was even possible. That realization does something subtle but profound. It doesn't make us irrelevant. It makes us late arrivals to a party that was already unimaginably large. And here's the escalation Webb forces on us if galaxies formed this early. Gravity had help. Something accelerated structure formation. Maybe dark matter clumped faster than expected. Maybe stars formed more efficiently. Maybe our timelines are compressed. Or maybe, and this is where scale opens instead of closes, the universe is far larger, older in effective structure, and more populated than our observable window suggests. Scientists are still uncovering how this happened, but the implication keeps expanding. The universe didn't ease into complexity, it slammed into it. Which means the true scale of the universe isn't just measured in distance. It's measured in how fast enormity arrived. And if enormity arrived this fast here, it almost certainly arrived everywhere. We're going to keep following that implication outward, backward, and uncomfortably far beyond the edge we thought we understood, because once Webb cracks the timeline, it doesn't just change when galaxies formed. It changes what big even means. Once you accept that the early universe was already crowded, everything downstream starts to warp. Because scale isn't just about size, or it's about inevitability. If galaxies that massive existed when the universe was barely out of its cosmic infancy, then their existence wasn't a rare miracle. It was the default outcome. Gravity didn't struggle. It dominated. Matter didn't hesitate. It collapsed with confidence. The universe didn't wait politely for complexity to emerge. It rushed it. We tend to picture the Big Bang like an explosion that flings material outward into emptiness. A flash, then debris, then a long, quiet cooling. But Webb's view suggests something more unsettling, not debris dispersing, but structure snapping into place, almost immediately, as if the universe knew what it was going to become and wasted no time getting there. To feel why this is extreme, we have to sit inside those early moments. Imagine the universe at 300 million years old. No planets, no heavy chemistry, no oxygen-rich atmospheres. Space filled mostly with hydrogen and helium, the simplest elements possible. This is supposed to be a thin fog gravity slowly tugging, tiny ripples growing over immense timescales. Instead, Webb shows us galaxies blazing in infrared, meaning their stars are already hot, numerous, and energetic. Star formation rates that should take billions of years appear to be compressed into cosmic instants. Whole galactic populations ignite almost at once. That shouldn't feel possible. It's like discovering that a forest didn't grow tree by tree, but erupted fully formed in a geological blink. Trunks, canopies, roots all there before the soil should even support them. And when something happens that fast, the scale of the underlying system has to be enormous, because speed at that level requires resources, matter, space, time acting in parallel. This is where the idea of we were wrong becomes literal. Our previous telescopes trained us to think of the early universe as dim and sparse. Hubble saw faint smudges, hints of galaxies still assembling. Webb sees brilliance where we expected weakness. And brightness at those distances isn't cosmetic. It means mass. It means density. It means there's far more going on than our old models budgeted for. So we zoom out, not in distance yet in volume. The observable universe contains on the order of 2 trillion galaxies. That number was already uncomfortable. Webb doesn't reduce it. If anything, it pressures it upward, because it reveals entire populations of faint, distant galaxies we were previously blind to. Galaxies hiding behind dust. Galaxies whose light is stretched so far into infrared that Hubble simply couldn't register them. Webb can, and when it looks, the count keeps rising. Now think carefully about what that implies. 2 trillion galaxies is not the total number of galaxies, it's the number inside the observable horizon, a sphere defined not by physical boundaries, but by time, by how long light has had to reach us. Beyond that horizon, the universe doesn't stop, it continues. If the part we can see is already this crowded, the unseen part isn't likely to be emptier. There is no reason for it to be special. Cosmology rests on that assumption. What we see here is representative, not exceptional. Which means the true number of galaxies may not be trillions. It may be effectively uncountable. This is where the scale stops behaving like a number and starts behaving like an experience. Because when quantities exceed any possible act of counting, they stop being quantities. They become conditions, backgrounds, realities you live inside rather than objects you measure. The universe may not be large in the way a mountain is large. It may be large in the way an ocean is large, continuous, repeating, extending beyond every horizon you can reach. And James Webb didn't prove that directly. It didn't need to. It showed us enough density, enough early structure, enough abundance to force the conclusion emotionally before it arrives intellectually. Now bring humanity back into frame not as explorers, but as signals. Every radio transmission we've ever sent has travelled outward at the speed of light, forming a growing bubble around Earth. That bubble is about 100 light-years across. It hasn't even cleared our local stellar neighbourhood. It hasn't brushed the edge of our galaxy, let alone reached another. Against the scale Webb implies, our entire communicative footprint is a rounding error. But that doesn't erase us. It situates us. We exist inside a universe that was already unimaginably busy long before we arrived. A universe that didn't need us to become complex, but now contains us anyway. We are not the builders of scale. We are the witnesses of it. And witnessing something this large does something dangerous to intuition. Because once you feel that the universe is not sparsely populated but richly filled, the question changes. It's no longer how big is the universe. It becomes how much of this is happening at once. Right now, as you sit here, stars are forming in galaxies whose light will never reach Earth. Black holes are merging beyond our horizon, sending ripples through space-time that will fade before they ever touch us. Entire histories are unfolding in parallel, sealed off not by walls but by time itself. Webb's images make this simultaneous enormity unavoidable. Those deep-field shots aren't postcards from the past. They're cross-sections through an active, layered reality. Each point of light is not just far away, it's a different era, a different chapter, stacked along the same line of sight. We are looking through time like sedimentary rock, and there is no bottom layer in sight. This is where the universe starts to feel less like a story with a beginning and middle, and more like a process that never stopped accelerating. Expansion didn't thin it out the way we imagined. It stretched it. Yes, but gravity kept stitching it back together, faster than expected, earlier than expected, everywhere at once. Scientists are still uncovering how these early galaxies assembled so quickly, but the emotional consequences already locked in the universe did not grow gently. It surged. And when something surges on that scale, containment becomes impossible. We haven't reached the most unsettling implication yet. Not even close. Because once scale stops being about distance and starts being about abundance, the next question isn't how far the universe goes. It's how many times it repeats. And James Webb, without saying a word, has nudged us right up to that edge. Repetition is where scale stops being comfortable. Distance can be imagined. Abundance can be counted. But repetition, the idea that the same structures, the same processes, the same outcomes are happening over and over again beyond any possible horizon, that's where intuition finally gives up. Because if the early universe produced massive galaxies everywhere we look, as fast as Webb suggests, then those galaxies weren't exceptions. They were templates. Gravity followed rules. Matter followed gradients. Physics didn't improvise, it executed. And when rules execute at cosmic scale, they don't produce one result. They produce versions, variations, copies. Not identical, but familiar. This is where the universe stops feeling like a singular event and starts feeling like a factory. We're used to thinking of our galaxy as special because it's home. A spiral with a central bulge, graceful arms, a supermassive black hole at its core. It feels rare until you realize Webb is finding spiral-like structures, shockingly early hints of order where chaos was supposed to dominate. Rotation where randomness should still reign. Order arrived early, which means order likely arrived often. Now pull back again, not just in space, but in logic. The laws of physics appear uniform across the observable universe. The same spectral lines, the same constants, the same behaviors. Webb confirms this with every distant galaxy it studies. Different histories, same rules, different locations, same outcomes. Uniform rules plus vast space equals repetition. Not once or not twice, but beyond meaningful counting. This doesn't mean duplicates of Earth. Not yet. This isn't about life. This is deeper. This is about structure, about galaxies that look like galaxies, stars that burn like stars, black holes that grow like black holes forming again and again, because that's simply what matter does when given enough room and time. And Webb is telling us there was a lot of room, very early. The emotional shift here is subtle but irreversible. The universe is no longer something that happened. It's something that keeps happening, everywhere, which reframes our presence entirely. We like to think of ourselves as late, but unique, tiny, but singular. Yet when you place humanity inside a universe that mass-produces complexity, uniqueness becomes fragile. Not meaningless fragile, a spark that matters locally, but may not be cosmically rare. And that idea doesn't diminish us. It changes our role. We are not the climax of the universe's story. We are a chapter that learned to look back. James Webb didn't just extend our vision. It turned us into self-aware witnesses of a process far larger than our narrative instincts evolved to handle. Our brains are built for savannas and seasons, not for factories of galaxies operating across billions of light years. So we cope with metaphors. We say cosmic web, and Webb shows it glowing faintly. Filaments of matter stretching between clusters, like scaffolding laid down before the buildings rose. Gravity didn't just clump randomly. It followed channels. It flowed. It organized matter along invisible highways tens of millions of light years long. Highways built before stars. That detail matters, because it means the universe didn't wait for complexity to emerge from randomness. It seeded structure first, then let everything else follow, like laying down roads before cities, ensuring growth would be fast, efficient, inevitable. Which brings us to dark matter not as a mystery, but as a scale amplifier. Dark matter doesn't shine. Webb can't see it directly, but its fingerprints are everywhere in what Webb observes. Galaxies rotating too fast, mass distributed too smoothly, structures forming too early. Dark matter acts like invisible infrastructure, scaffolding reality before visible matter arrives. And if that scaffolding existed everywhere, which evidence strongly suggests, then the universe had a head start everywhere. Not just here. Every early galaxy Webb finds implies countless others just beyond its reach, forming in parallel, following the same invisible blueprint. The observable universe stops feeling like a special stage and starts feeling like a window into an ongoing performance. We are peering through a crack, and what we see through it is not emptiness, but crowding. This is where the idea of the true scale quietly explodes, because the universe's size is no longer just about how far it extends. It's about how much is happening per unit of space, per unit of time, the density of events, the throughput of creation. At that scale, even time itself starts to feel different. Billions of years no longer feel like an epic duration. They feel like operational time, like warm-up, like the ramp-up phase of something that got very large very quickly and never really slowed down. Which leads to an uncomfortable realization our entire cosmic history from the first stars to now may be happening during what the universe considers its early efficiency window. We are not late in a tired cosmos. We may be early in an ongoing one. Webb hints at this by showing us galaxies still forming, still colliding, still feeding black holes at staggering rates. The universe hasn't settled into quiet maturity. It's still busy, still productive, still turning matter into structure with industrial consistency. And we are inside that process, not observing it from outside. Your body is made of atoms forged in ancient stars. Yes, but those stars were part of a much larger assembly line, one that was already operating at scale before the Milky Way existed, one that will continue long after our galaxy changes beyond recognition. That perspective doesn't erase meaning, it reframes it. Meaning is no longer about being central. It's about being conscious within something vast. And consciousness, in a universe this large, becomes precious not because it's unique, but because it's aware. We don't just exist inside scale. We feel it. That feeling, the vertigo, the awe, the slight destabilization is not a bug. It's the correct response. James Webb wasn't built to comfort us. It was built to reveal. And what it's revealing is not a universe gently unfolding toward us, but one that was already immense, already structured, already repeating itself long before we were around to notice. The next escalation comes when we push this logic even further, when repetition meets possibility, and scale collides with the question we've avoided so far. Not how big is the universe, but how many chances does it have? Chances change everything. Because once you accept repetition at cosmic scale, probability stops being abstract and starts becoming physical. It stops living on paper and starts living in space. And the universe James Webb is hinting at is not conservative with chances. It is extravagant with them. We tend to think of rare events as precious because they don't happen often. But that intuition collapses in a universe that runs the same experiment everywhere. All the time. Across volumes so large they erase the meaning of often. If galaxy formation was fast and common, then star formation was fast and common. If stars were common, then planets were inevitable. Not special outcomes, not lucky breaks, inevitable byproducts of scale. Webb doesn't just show galaxies, it shows chemistry beginning early, carbon appearing sooner than expected, oxygen present when the universe should barely have progressed beyond hydrogen and helium. These elements don't appear by accident. They're forged in stars, then scattered by explosions, which means stars lived, died, and enriched space faster than we planned for. The universe wasn't waiting to become interesting. It rushed. Now imagine how many times this cycle has played out beyond our horizon. How many stellar generations, how many planetary systems assembling and disassembling, again and again, in regions we will never see. This is where chance stops feeling like luck and starts feeling like saturation. If you run the same process enough times, outcomes stop being improbable. They become unavoidable, and that forces us to revisit a question we've historically treated as philosophical, not physical. How alone could we realistically be? This isn't an argument about aliens yet. This is about scale pressure. The kind of pressure that doesn't demand a conclusion but bends every assumption toward abundance. We live on one planet, around one star, in one galaxy. That feels singular until you place it inside a universe with trillions of galaxies, each with billions of stars, many with planets, and now Webb suggests that this architecture assembled early and everywhere, which means the universe didn't just have time to try, it had room for countless parallel experiments unfolding simultaneously, under the same physical laws, with the same building blocks, across epochs that overlap like waves. Even if complex life were rare, incredibly rare scale eats rarity for breakfast. A 1 in a billion outcome becomes routine if you roll the dice enough times. And Webb is showing us a casino with more tables than we ever imagined. But here's the important turn: this doesn't make humanity feel replaceable. It makes us contextual. Because what matters isn't whether we are alone. It's that we exist in a universe capable of producing observers at all observers who can look back across 13 billion years and reconstruct a story this vast. That ability is fragile. It may flicker on and off across cosmic history, but right now, here, it's on. We are awake inside scale, and that awareness changes how we interpret everything Webb shows us. Those early galaxies aren't just distant objects. They are ancestors in a lineage of structure. They are proof that complexity isn't an anomaly, it's a tendency, a habit of matter under gravity. Which brings us back to something quietly radical. The universe may not be fine-tuned for life in the way we often imagine. It may be fine-tuned for complexity, and life is one of the things complexity does when given enough opportunity. Webb isn't searching for life directly, but it's laying bare the conditions that make life plausible not once, but many times. It's showing us a universe that doesn't whisper its possibilities, it shouts them. And yet, for all this abundance, there is still isolation. The same expansion that fills the universe with galaxies also pulls them apart. Space itself stretches, carrying regions beyond causal contact. Light from most galaxies will never reach us. Signals we send will never arrive. The universe is generous with creation, but ruthless with separation. Which means that even in a universe overflowing with chances, each observer may still feel alone. That tension abundance without connection is one of the deepest emotional consequences of scale. We are surrounded by possibility and sealed off from it at the same time. James Webb doesn't resolve that tension, it sharpens it. By showing us how early and how often the universe builds complexity, it makes the silence feel heavier, not emptier heavier. As if we're standing in a crowded room divided by walls of expanding space, aware of presence but unable to touch it. And that awareness circles back to us. Our planet is fragile not because the universe is hostile, but because it is indifferent at scale. The same processes that build galaxies also tear them apart. The same stars that forge elements also explode. Complexity arises, but it is never guaranteed permanence. Which makes moments of awareness, moments like this one, precious, not because they are cosmically unique, but because they are locally rare. You are alive during a brief window when your species can see this far, understand this much, and feel this deeply. That window didn't have to open, it did, and it won't stay open forever. Webb is part of that window. It's a tool built by a young civilization, peering back toward the universe's earlier successes, trying to understand what kind of place could produce both galaxies and minds capable of wondering about them. And here's the quiet closure this part of the journey offers. The universe doesn't need us to be meaningful. But meaning can exist within it anyway. Scale doesn't erase significance, it reframes it. We matter not because we are central, but because we are conscious participants in something staggeringly vast, something that began fast, grew huge, and continues unfolding in ways we're only beginning to glimpse. And the deeper Webb looks, the clearer one truth becomes: this universe is not cautious with possibility. It spends it freely. The next step is to confront what happens when that freedom collides with time itself, not early time, not distant time, but the future that this scale is still accelerating toward. Time is the final multiplier. Distance gives the universe room. Repetition gives it momentum. But time is what lets scale turn from impressive into overwhelming. And the James Webb Space Telescope isn't just showing us how big the universe already was, it's hinting at how much bigger it is still becoming. We tend to imagine the universe aging the way living things age, energetic at first, then gradually slowing, cooling, settling down. A long twilight after a bright beginning. That intuition is comfortable. It suggests a story arc we recognize. Webb makes that arc feel suspiciously optimistic. Because what it's really showing us is a universe that didn't peak early and fade. It ramped up early and then kept going. The expansion of space isn't slowing in any meaningful way. On the larger scales, it's accelerating. Galaxies aren't just moving away from each other. The space between them is stretching faster over time. Regions that are visible today will slip beyond our horizon tomorrow, not dramatically, not suddenly, but inexorably. The universe isn't closing a chapter. It's widening the page. This matters because when you combine early abundance with accelerating expansion, you don't get a universe that runs out of opportunities. You get one that isolates them. Creation doesn't stop. Communication does. Right now, the observable universe contains hundreds of billions of galaxies we can still see. In the far future, that number will dwindle, not because galaxies vanish, but because they drift beyond reach. Each civilization, if it arises, becomes locked inside its own shrinking island of visibility. James Webb is letting us see a moment of cosmic overlap, a brief era when the universe is both richly populated and still partially connected, when light from the early cosmos can still reach us, when history hasn't yet slipped behind the curtain of expansion. We are living at a rare intersection of scale and access. And that intersection won't last. Think about that humanly. Every discovery Webb makes every early galaxy, every ancient star-forming region is information rescued just in time. Light that barely made it before the universe stretched too far. Messages sent billions of years ago, arriving during a narrow window when there's still someone here to receive them. If we had evolved a few billion years later, the night sky would look emptier. Not because the universe was smaller, but because it would be quieter to us. The deep past would be hidden. The early abundance would be sealed away forever. Which means our sense of scale is a privilege of timing. We didn't just build a powerful telescope. We built it at exactly the right moment. And Webb is using that moment to show us something unsettling about the future. If early structure formed quickly and everywhere, then complexity didn't slow the universe down. It scaled with it. Which implies that whatever the universe is good at building galaxies, igniting stars, forging elements, it will keep doing as long as conditions allow. Time doesn't tame scale. It amplifies it. Over trillions of years, galaxies will merge, black holes will grow, structures will simplify into fewer, larger entities. The universe's activity won't end, it will consolidate. Vast, slow processes unfolding across expanses so large they make our current era feel frantic by comparison. And somewhere inside that future, observers may arise who look out at a much emptier sky and conclude, wrongly, that the universe was always sparse, that scale was modest, that history was quiet. They won't know what we know. They won't see what Webb shows us. That the universe began loud, crowded, and fast. That complexity didn't creep in, it surged. Which brings us back to us, here, now. We're not just witnesses to scale. We're archivists of it. The universe is writing over its own early chapters, stretching them out of reach, and we're among the last generations capable of reading them directly. That doesn't make us important in a cosmic sense. It makes us responsible in a narrative one, because scale without memory is just magnitude. Scale with memory becomes story. James Webb is turning raw magnitude into something we can carry, not fully understand, but feel. It compresses billions of years into images that fit on screens. It takes distances that defy language and renders them as points of light your eyes can grasp. That act translating extremity into experience is what allows scale to matter. And the more Webb shows us, the clearer it becomes that the universe doesn't revolve around singular moments. It revolves around throughput, around how much happens per unit time, per unit space. Our existence occupies a vanishingly thin slice of that flow. But within that slice, awareness blooms. You are alive in a universe that was already immense before Earth formed, and that will continue expanding long after our species is gone. Yet for this moment, that universe is knowable, partially, briefly, enough to leave an imprint. That's the emotional resolution scale offers. Not comfort, perspective. We don't need the universe to be small to matter. We need it to be comprehensible enough to touch our imagination and vast enough to remind us that our concerns are not the only story being told. Webb doesn't end the story of the universe. It widens it so dramatically that endings feel beside the point. What matters is that for a short window. Consciousness emerged inside a system this large and decided to look back, to ask how fast it grew, how early it crowded itself with galaxies, how much possibility it spent before we ever arrived, and whether that spending is still ongoing. The answer Webb keeps pointing toward is yes. The universe is not done. It is still scaling, and we're catching it mid-stride aware just long enough to feel how enormous that stride really is. Mid-stride is the only place we ever get to stand. We never see beginnings cleanly. We never see endings at all. We arrive while systems are already moving, already accelerating, already committed to trajectories too large for us to redirect. James Webb doesn't put us at the start of the universe's story. It drops us into the middle of a sentence that began long before we were born and will continue long after we're gone. And the sentence is long. What Webb really confronts us with is not ancient light, but momentum. The universe had momentum almost immediately. Within a few 100 million years, gravity had already carved matter into galaxies, stars were already cycling material, black holes were already anchoring structure. The engine wasn't warming up, it was running. That matters because momentum doesn't ask permission. Once something that large is moving, it keeps moving unless acted on by something larger still. Nothing larger has shown up, so the universe keeps going. When we talk about the scale of the universe, we often mean size, but Webb forces a different interpretation scale as process, as throughput, as the rate at which reality turns raw ingredients into structure, then structure into history. Early on, that rate was astonishing, and there's no sign it ever truly slowed. Yes, star formation peaked billions of years ago. Yes, some regions are quieter now, but quiet is relative. Even today, stars are being born at a rate that would overwhelm any human timescale. Galaxies collide, clusters merge, black holes feed. On the larger scales, the universe is still busy just with projects that take hundreds of millions of years instead of thousands. This is where our sense of time finally breaks. Because once processes stretch beyond lifetimes, generations, civilizations, they stop feeling like events. They start feeling like conditions, like gravity itself, always there, always acting, rarely noticed until you step back far enough. James Webb gives us that step back. It shows us that the universe didn't settle into being large. It was born large in effect, if not in extent. The blueprint for enormity was present almost immediately, and the rest of cosmic history has been an execution of that plan, which means the future is not an epilogue. It's a continuation, and that continuation is shaped by one uncomfortable truth: expansion wins. As space stretches, regions slip away from one another permanently. Not dramatically, no explosions, no tearing, just quiet separation. A galaxy drifts far enough that its light never reaches us again. Then another, then entire clusters fade. Over unimaginably long timescales, every observer becomes isolated, surrounded by a shrinking archive of the universe's past. Webb's images are an archive in advance. They show us a time when the universe was young and crowded, and they show it to us now, before that crowd disperses beyond memory. We are seeing density at the moment it's still legible. That makes this era emotionally unstable in a very specific way. We live with access to an abundance that we know is temporary. We know more about the universe than any generation before us, and less than those far in the future may infer theoretically, but we are the last who can directly see this much of it. The last to receive light from the earliest galaxies, the last to look back and say, this is what the universe was like when it first got going. That awareness sharpens everything. It makes the night sky feel less like scenery and more like a countdown. Not to an end to a narrowing. And narrowing changes meaning, if the universe was small, our significance would be measured by proportion. If it was static, by position. But in a universe this large and this dynamic, meaning comes from timing. We are here when scale is visible. We are here when questions can still be anchored to evidence. We are here when the universe hasn't yet hidden its own origins. James Webb is not just a telescope, it's a timing device, a reminder that access itself is fleeting at cosmic scale. And yet this is not a tragic realization. Because scale doesn't just isolate, it also connects backward. Every image Webb sends back is proof that the universe is intelligible enough, at least locally, to be reconstructed. That light carries information faithfully across billions of years. That cause and effect still matter, even when separated by distances that dwarf imagination. The universe is large, but it is not chaotic. It is lawful. That lawfulness is what allows us to stand here, now, mid-stride, and piece together a story that began long before us. And when you let that sink in, the feeling shifts. The universe stops feeling indifferent. Not because it cares, but because it permits understanding. Not total understanding and not comfort, but participation. We are not outside observers. We are embedded narrators, made of the same matter, Webb studies, governed by the same rules. Temporary configurations of a process that has been running since the first moments of time. Which means when we look at those early galaxies, impossibly massive, impossibly early, we are not just seeing them, we are seeing our own ancestry scaled up. The same gravity that shaped them shaped the stars that forged the atoms in your body. The same expansion that stretches their light stretches the space between neurons in your brain, imperceptibly, constantly. Scale is not external. It runs through us. And that realization prepares us for the next threshold, the one Webb is approaching but has not yet crossed. Because once you accept that the universe is vast, abundant, repetitive, accelerating, and temporally stratified, there is one final pressure point left. Not size, not time, not chance, but consequence. What does a universe like this do with intelligence once it appears? Not just once, but potentially many times. That question doesn't end the story. It opens the next one. And Webb, quietly, relentlessly, is pushing us closer to it. Consequence is where scale finally turns inward. A universe this large doesn't just create things, it selects for what can last inside it. Gravity selects structure. Time selects stability. Expansion selects isolation. And intelligence, if it appears, is forced to navigate all of it at once. James Webb doesn't show us intelligence, but it shows us the arena intelligence must survive in, and that arena is not gentle. The early universe, Webb reveals, is efficient, fast, and unsentimental. Stars ignite quickly, galaxies assemble aggressively, black holes grow without apology, energy flows downhill towards structure, and anything caught in that flow either adapts or disappears. That's the environment intelligence emerges from. Not a quiet cosmos, not a balanced one, a dynamic one that rewards systems capable of anticipating change, which reframes intelligence itself. We tend to think of intelligence as a peak, a rare flower blooming atop cosmic complexity. But in a universe that builds complexity everywhere, intelligence starts to look less like a miracle and more like a response, a strategy, a way for matter to model its own future in a system that never stops moving. If that's true, then intelligence is not the universe breaking its own rules. It's the universe expressing them at a new scale. And Webb forces us to take that idea seriously because it shows us how early and how often the prerequisites were laid down. Dense galaxies, rapid star formation, heavy elements appearing sooner than expected. The raw materials for chemistry and therefore for biology were present almost immediately, everywhere. Which means intelligence didn't have to wait for a calm universe. It emerged in a loud one. Now feel the pressure of that realization. If intelligence arises in a universe defined by expansion and isolation, then its first challenge is not curiosity. It's survival across distance. Signals weaken, resources spread out, causal contact breaks. The universe doesn't end civilizations, it separates them from everything else. And that may be the most consequential feature of scale, because in a small universe, intelligence could pool, communicate, accumulate. In a universe like ours, intelligence fragments. Each emergence is local, each story largely sealed within its own horizon, which means the universe may be filled with intelligence that never meets, never knows of the others, never confirms it isn't alone. Not because there is nothing else, but because scale forbids contact. That possibility changes how we interpret silence. The absence of signals isn't evidence of absence. It may be evidence of distance, not just spatial, but temporal. Civilizations rising and falling out of sync. Signals crossing regions after their senders are long gone. Awareness flickering on and off across cosmic time, never overlapping long enough to connect. Webb doesn't answer this. It sharpens it. By showing us how fast and how early the universe builds complexity, it makes the emergence of intelligence feel less fantastical and the lack of contact feel more structural. Which brings us back to us not as searchers, but as participants. We are one instance of awareness inside a universe that appears optimized for producing instances. We arose late relative to the first galaxies, but early relative to the long future ahead. We are intelligent during the era when the universe is still observable, still crowded with visible history. That timing is not random. It's a narrow band. Too early, and there isn't enough structure. Too late, and expansion erases the evidence. We exist in the middle when scale is large enough to inspire awe, but not yet so large that it hides itself completely. That middle position gives intelligence a role. Not dominion. Witness. James Webb is an extension of that role. It is intelligence building an eye to look back at the system that made it. Matter reflecting on matter. The universe briefly becoming aware of its own scale. And that awareness carries consequence. Because once intelligence understands the size and dynamics of the universe, it can no longer pretend permanence. It can no longer assume centrality. It has to adapt its goals to a reality that will outlast it by orders of magnitude. In a universe like this, survival is not about conquest. It's about alignment. Aligning with energy flows, with long timescales, with the fact that expansion will isolate, that stars will burn out, that accessible resources will dwindle. Intelligence that survives is intelligence that plans across deep time. And here's the unsettling thought Webb quietly enables if intelligence emerges often. Then somewhere, somewhen, intelligence may have already faced these constraints, already adapted, already moved beyond the fragile phase we're in now. Not through magic, through scale awareness, through realizing early what kind of universe this is. A universe that rewards foresight. A universe where the biggest threats are not explosions, but gradient slow drifts toward isolation, entropy, and silence. We are just beginning to see that our technology is young, our planning horizons are short, but Webb stretches our perception far enough to glimpse the long game. It shows us that the universe is not a static backdrop. It is an active environment that intelligence must negotiate. And that negotiation is ongoing. Right now, as you absorb these images and ideas, you are participating in a process that began when the first galaxies lit up the universe, experimenting with structure until something could understand structure. That loop structure creating awareness. Awareness reflecting on structure may be the rarest thing of all. Not because intelligence is unlikely, but because self-awareness at cosmic scale requires timing, tools, and perspective to align. We have that alignment now, and it won't last forever, which gives this moment weight. James Webb is not just expanding our knowledge, it is compressing urgency. It is telling us, without drama, that this era when the universe is both vast and visible is finite. What we do with that awareness matters. Not to the universe, to the story intelligence tells itself inside it. Because if scale teaches us anything, it's this: the universe doesn't provide meaning. It provides conditions. Meaning is what intelligence builds when it understands the conditions correctly. And Webb is teaching us, with brutal clarity, what those conditions are. Vastness, abundance, acceleration, isolation, and a brief window where understanding is possible. We are inside that window now. The next question is not whether the universe is big. That has been answered. The question is what intelligence does once it finally believes the answer. Belief is the hinge. Not knowledge belief, because knowledge can sit on a shelf. Belief changes behavior, and a universe this large demands belief at a scale our instincts resist. We can recite numbers about billions of years and trillions of galaxies and still live as if tomorrow is all that matters. James Webb doesn't care about recitation. It pressures belief. It forces scale past abstraction and into consequence. Once intelligence truly believes the universe is this vast, priorities reorder. Short-term dominance looks childish. Local victories feel temporary. Even survival starts to look insufficient unless it's paired with continuity. In a universe that stretches everything apart, the deepest challenge isn't competition, it's persistence. Webb shows us galaxies that formed early and endured, not because they were aggressive, but because they were massive enough, structured enough, to survive mergers, starbursts, feedback, and time. Scale itself became a defense. Stability emerged from size and organization. That's not a coincidence. That's a lesson written in light. Structures that last in this universe are not delicate. They are layered, redundant, adaptable. They absorb shocks and keep going. The early galaxies Webb reveals weren't tidy. They were messy, active, resilient. They survived because they could process energy without tearing themselves apart. Intelligence faces the same test. In a universe defined by vastness and acceleration, fragile systems don't last, not because something attacks them, but because scale overwhelms them. Entropy, isolation, resource gradients. These aren't villains. They're ambient conditions. So intelligence that persists must scale itself without losing coherence. And here's the uncomfortable mirror Webb holds up to us. We're still behaving like a small universe species. Our planning horizons are measured in years, our institutions in decades. Our sense of responsibility rarely extends beyond generations we'll never meet. But the universe Webb reveals doesn't operate on those clocks. It operates on millions and billions of years timescales where short-term thinking simply dissolves. Which means belief in scale is not optional if intelligence wants to matter to itself. This isn't about saving the universe. The universe doesn't need saving. It's about saving continuity, the ability for awareness to persist long enough to justify its own emergence. And continuity is fragile. Stars don't care about civilizations. Galaxies don't adjust for biology. Expansion doesn't pause for meaning. The universe offers no guarantees beyond consistency of law. James Webb confirms that consistency. The same physics applies everywhere it looks. The same rules produced galaxies early and relentlessly, which means those rules will continue to apply to us. We are not exceptions. That realization can feel cold until you flip it. Because consistency also means predictability, and predictability means foresight is possible. The universe doesn't ambush, it unfolds. Expansion will isolate regions. We know this. Stars will exhaust fuel. We know this. Entropy will rise. We know this. These aren't mysteries. They're schedules. Scale awareness turns doom into logistics. The universe isn't hostile. It's scheduled. An intelligence that believes this stops asking how to win and starts asking how to endure. James Webb is a belief engine in that sense. It confronts us with early abundance not to impress us, but to contextualize us, to show that we are not living at the climax of cosmic history, but in one operational phase of a much longer process. That perspective changes ethics, it changes ambition, it changes what progress even means. Progress stops being about speed. It becomes about alignment with long-term conditions. And here's where the human frame tightens. You're a temporary configuration of matter inside a universe that has been configuring matter for over 13 billion years. That could feel diminishing, but Webb shows us that temporary configurations can matter enormously if they connect phases of the process. Early galaxies mattered because they forged elements. Later galaxies mattered because they organized them. Stars mattered because they burned and exploded. Planets mattered because they concentrated chemistry. Life mattered because it learned to adapt. Intelligence matters because it can remember. Memory is what scale erases first. Expansion isolates. Time overwrites. Histories vanish. Intelligence that records, preserves, and transmits understanding becomes a counterforce not against physics, but against forgetfulness. James Webb is an act of memory extended backward. It rescues the universe's early chapters before they slide out of reach. It preserves evidence that density came early, that complexity surged, that scale arrived fast and everywhere. Without tools like this, future intelligence might infer a quieter origin, a sparser universe, a smaller story. Webb ensures that doesn't happen. And that is a profound act. Not discovery, preservation. Because in a universe this large, truth is not automatically remembered, it has to be carried. Which brings us to the most destabilizing implication, yet scale doesn't just test intelligence's ability to survive. It tests its ability to remain honest. In a shrinking, observable universe, narratives will drift, evidence will thin, assumptions will harden. Intelligence that loses access to the past risks misunderstanding the system it inhabits. We are at the edge of that risk. We can still see deep time. We can still verify early abundance. We can still feel the true scale of the universe instead of guessing at it. That makes belief a responsibility. Belief that the universe is vast. Belief that it was crowded early. Belief that scale is not a metaphor but an operating condition. And belief that intelligence must adapt its self-image accordingly. James Webb doesn't demand awe for its own sake. Awe is a side effect. What it really demands is humility of ambition and boldness of planning the ability to think small enough to survive locally and large enough to persist globally. We are not ready for that yet, but we are closer than we were. Because once belief shifts, behavior follows. And belief shifts when scale stops being something you know and becomes something you feel. Webb has done that. The next and final escalation isn't about what the universe is. It's about what kind of intelligence can exist inside a universe like this, and whether believing the truth early enough changes the ending at all. Endings are illusions we use to stay calm. The universe doesn't aim for them, it drifts past them. What James Webb is forcing us to confront now is not a conclusion, but a trajectory, and trajectories care deeply about starting conditions. The earlier you understand the direction you're moving in, the more leverage you have over where you end up. That's the final pressure scale applies to intelligence. Not survival in the next century. Survival across cosmic eras. Webb shows us that the universe scaled up fast, everywhere, without waiting for observers. Intelligence, when it appears, doesn't get to vote on that reality, it inherits it. And inheritance comes with constraints. Energy gradients flatten. Resources disperse. Distances grow. Isolation increases. None of this is sudden. All of it is relentless. Which means the defining question for intelligence isn't how advanced can we become. It's how far into the future can awareness be carried. Because awareness doesn't automatically persist. It flickers, it emerges, peaks, collapses, on Earth. Entire civilizations have risen and vanished in the time it takes stars to blink, against cosmic timescales. Intelligence is a fragile flame in a windless but infinite room not extinguished by gusts, but by neglect. James Webb doesn't show us that fragility directly. It makes us feel it by contrast. When you see galaxies that have existed for over 13 billion years, structures that outlast any biological lineage, it becomes clear how short-lived intelligence usually is, not because it's weak, but because it's young, because it hasn't yet learned to operate on the timescales the universe demands. This is where belief becomes action. An intelligence that truly accepts the scale Webb reveals stops chasing immortality and starts engineering continuity, not eternal life continuity of knowledge, continuity of memory, continuity of perspective. Because in a universe that erases its own past through expansion, memory is the rarest resource. Think about this. Every image Webb captures is a message from a time that no longer exists. Those galaxies are older now, changed. Some may be gone entirely. What we see is preserved only because light is stubborn enough to travel for billions of years without forgetting where it came from. Light is the universe's memory medium. Intelligence is the only thing that can read it. And that reading is time-limited, which reframes everything we're doing right now, every archive, every telescope, every record as a race against cosmic amnesia, not panic, just physics. If intelligence arises often, as scale suggests it might, then most instances likely fail to cross the threshold we're approaching. Now the point where understanding the universe's trajectory becomes essential to survival rather than curiosity. Many intelligences may never build a James Webb. They may collapse before belief shifts. That possibility doesn't make us superior. It makes us early in a dangerous sense. We are among the first, at least locally, to see the universe clearly enough to understand what it will do over trillions of years. That clarity is not comforting. It removes excuses. Once you know the river's direction, drifting becomes a choice. And here's the quiet escalation Webb introduces if intelligence elsewhere reached this stage earlier. Billions of years before us, they would have faced these same constraints with far more time to adapt. Time is leverage. We have little of it. Which doesn't mean doom, it means focus. The universe is not asking intelligence to conquer space. That's a misunderstanding born of science fiction. Space doesn't need conquering. It needs navigating selectively, patiently, strategically. The civilizations that persist will not be the loudest or the fastest. They will be the ones that align with the universe's long-term gradients. They will build systems that endure isolation. They will prioritize memory over expansion. They will trade short-term growth for long-term coherence. That's not speculation. That's extrapolation from what Webb already shows us. Early galaxies that survived did so by being massive, redundant, and adaptable. Fragile ones merged or vanished. The same selection pressure applies at every scale. The universe doesn't judge intent. It filters outcomes. And here is where the narrative closes inward on you. You are part of an intelligence that has just begun to feel the true scale of the universe. Not intellectually, emotionally. Enough to destabilize old priorities. Enough to make progress feel incomplete if it isn't anchored to continuity. James Webb is not the end of this realization. It's the beginning. The moment when intelligence stops seeing the universe as a backdrop and starts seeing it as an environment with rules that extend far beyond any single species' lifespan. That shift is irreversible. Once you believe the universe is this vast, this old, this fast, this repetitive, and this isolating, you cannot return to small stories. You can still live locally. You can still care deeply about human things. But you can no longer pretend those things are happening in a closed room. They're happening on a shoreline that is slowly receding. And awareness of that doesn't diminish life. It sharpens it. It makes continuity meaningful. It makes foresight moral. It makes memory sacred. James Webb didn't reveal the true scale of the universe just to humble us. It revealed it to position us. Small, yes, but included in a process that began before stars, that scaled up faster than we expected, and that will continue long after our species changes beyond recognition. We are not the audience. We are the moment when the universe became able to notice how large it already was. That moment doesn't need to last forever. It just needs to last long enough to matter. And whether it does depends on whether intelligence here now believes what it has finally seen and chooses to act like it understands the scale of the stage it's standing on. The universe will keep moving either way. The only open question left is whether awareness moves with it or flickers out. One brilliant temporary spark in a cosmos that never needed it, but allowed it anyway. That question doesn't end the story. It hands it to us. Handed to us doesn't mean owned by us. The universe doesn't pause because intelligence shows up. It doesn't slow its expansion, soften its gradients, or simplify its rules. It keeps doing what it has always done, stretching, clustering, burning, collapsing, whether anyone is watching or not. The only thing that changes when awareness appears is that the process becomes visible to itself. James Webb is the clearest proof of that visibility so far. Not because it's powerful, but because of when it exists. It exists at the exact moment when the universe's early density is still observable and its future isolation is already predictable. We are standing at a crossroads that only exist briefly in cosmic history after enough structure has formed to support intelligence. But before expansion erases the evidence of how it all began, that window is narrow, and narrow windows demand decisions, even if no one announces them. One of those decisions is whether intelligence treats scale as a curiosity or as a constraint. Because constraints change behavior. Once you accept that the universe is not just big but relentlessly expanding, you stop imagining permanence where none is possible. You stop building narratives that depend on static skies or eternal access. You start thinking in terms of migration, archiving, redundancy, not because you're afraid, but because you finally understand the terrain. James Webb gives us terrain awareness. It shows us that the early universe wasn't fragile, it was dense and fast, which means fragility came later not from a lack of resources, but from distance, from expansion thinning connections faster than complexity can bridge them. That insight flips a lot of instincts. It tells us the universe didn't start weak and become strong. It started strong and is becoming separated. Strength was never the problem. Continuity is. And continuity is not automatic. Galaxies survive by mass and cohesion. Clusters survive by gravity. Intelligence survives by something less obvious, by remembering what kind of universe it's in. Forget that, and you misallocate effort. You chase short-term signals, you confuse noise for progress, you build systems optimized for growth instead of persistence. Webb doesn't accuse us of doing this. It just makes the mistake visible. We evolved under a sky that felt stable. For most of human history, the universe appeared small and eternal. Stars were fixed. The cosmos felt like a ceiling, not a current. Our intuitions grew around that illusion. Now that illusion is gone. The sky is no longer static, it's historical. Every point of light is a different era, a different condition, a different chapter sliding past us at the speed of light. And Webb shows us that those chapters arrived faster than we thought, and stacked densely on top of one another. Which means the universe didn't wait for intelligence to get comfortable. It moved on. And here's the sobering part, it will keep moving on even if we do nothing. That doesn't mean disaster, it means irrelevance is an option. Not because intelligence is small, but because it can fail to align. Alignment is the hidden theme Webb reveals without naming it. Early galaxies aligned with gravity and survived. Structures that fought the flow didn't. This is not philosophy. It's visible in the data. And alignment, for intelligence, looks like something we're only beginning to understand, designing goals that make sense on million-year timescales, not election cycles. Preserving knowledge in forms that outlast civilizations, not formats that rot in decades. Treating awareness as something that must be carried forward deliberately, not assumed to persist. In a universe that erases access through expansion, preservation becomes an act of intelligence, not nostalgia. James Webb is preservation technology. It freezes light long enough for us to read it. And in doing so, it quietly reframes our role. We are not conquerors of space. We are translators between epochs, taking information from a universe that no longer exists and carrying it into a future that hasn't arrived yet. That's a strange responsibility. But it fits the scale. Because scale doesn't ask us to be important. It asks us to be accurate. Accurate about where we are in time. Accurate about what kind of universe this is. Accurate about what will happen regardless of our preferences. And Webb leaves very little room for comforting myths. The myth that complexity took its time. The myth that the universe gently ramped up. The myth that scale arrived late. All of those are gone. Scale arrived early. It arrived fast. and it arrived everywhere, which means intelligence didn't emerge at the climax of cosmic construction. It emerged after the scaffolding was already in place. That's not a disappointment. It's a clue. The universe may not be building toward intelligence. It may be building past it. Intelligence appears, looks around, and either adapts to the long-term flow or becomes a brief annotation in a much larger process. That sounds harsh until you realize something else Webb implies annotations matter. Not to the universe, to the story of awareness itself. Every instance of intelligence that understands the scale it inhabits adds depth to the universe's self-knowledge, not globally, locally, temporarily, but meaningfully. And meaning at scale doesn't need permanence. It needs transmission. James Webb is transmission across time. It is the universe whispering to us from an era we never lived in, saying this is how fast I grew, this is how dense I became, this is what I do when no one is watching. What we do with that message is the only part not determined by physics. We can treat it as spectacle, or we can treat it as instruction. Not instruction about equations or models, instruction about context, about what kind of environment intelligence has appeared in, about what kind of future is already unfolding whether we participate or not. We are not late to the universe. We are early to understanding it. That distinction matters, because being early gives leverage not over the cosmos, but over ourselves. It gives us the chance to stop acting like the sky is small, to stop building stories that assume the universe will wait, to start thinking like participants in a system that has already demonstrated what it values: scale, speed, repetition, and lawfulness. James Webb didn't reveal the true scale of the universe to intimidate us. It revealed it to orient us, so that when we decide what matters, what to preserve, what to pursue, what to let go, we do it with our eyes open, aware of how large the stage is, how fast it's moving, and how brief our moment of clarity really is. The universe doesn't need our understanding, but understanding may be the only thing that lets intelligence keep up with a universe that never stopped growing. Keeping up is not about speed. That's the mistake every young intelligence makes. It sees motion and assumes the answer is acceleration. Build faster, expand faster, consume faster. But the universe James Webb reveals does not reward raw speed. It rewards coherence over time. Galaxies don't survive because they expand quickly. They survive because they hold together while everything around them moves. They absorb collisions. They redistribute energy. They reorganize without losing identity. That's not growth. That's endurance. Webb shows us early galaxies that already understood this, in the only way matter ever understands anything by doing. Dense cores, massive halos, structures robust enough to survive a violent youth. They didn't outrun the universe. They matched it. This is the deeper lesson hiding beneath the spectacle. The true scale of the universe is not just large. It is patient. It doesn't rush endings. It lets processes play out fully, even when fully means billions of years. Stars burn until they exhaust fuel. Galaxies merge until they settle. Expansion continues without urgency, because it doesn't need to arrive anywhere. Time is not a resource the universe worries about. Intelligence does, and that difference matters, because intelligence that mistakes urgency for importance burns itself out. It optimizes for visibility instead of continuity. It confuses momentum with direction. James Webb quietly corrects that instinct by showing us that the universe's most influential structures are not the loudest, brightest, or fastest, but the ones that persist, which reframes what advanced might mean at cosmic scale. Not technological flash, not explosive expansion, but the ability to remain coherent while everything stretches apart. That ability is rare, not because it's complex, but because it requires restraint. Restraint is not a value evolution trains well. Most systems are rewarded for immediate success. The universe itself did this early on: rapid star formation, aggressive structure building. But once scale is established, the rules change. What built complexity quickly is not what preserves it indefinitely. And this is where intelligence stands at a fork. We have inherited a universe that already did its fast phase. The scaffolding is up, the galaxies are built, the early abundance is over. What remains is management of energy, of a knowledge, of isolation. James Webb is the message from the fast phase to the slow phase. It says this is how much was built before you existed, not as a boast, as context, because context determines strategy. If the universe was still ramping up, intelligence might chase growth, but Webb shows us that the ramp-up is done. We're not in the construction era of the cosmos. We're in the maintenance era, the long, drawn-out period where what exists slowly drifts apart. That changes everything. It means intelligence that matters long-term is intelligence that learns to curate rather than conquer, to preserve rather than proliferate, to choose where to invest limited energy instead of scattering it. None of that feels heroic in the traditional sense, but it matches the universe we actually live in. And here's the unsettling realization Webb brings into focus. The universe doesn't care if intelligence learns this in time. There is no feedback loop, no cosmic reward, no guarantee that awareness persists. Most complexity that ever existed is already gone. Not destroyed, forgotten, pulled beyond reach by expansion, lost to time not because it failed, but because nothing was there to remember it. That's the quiet violence of scale. It doesn't crush. It separates. And separation erases context faster than destruction ever could. Which makes memory the central currency of intelligence. Memory of where we are. Memory of how the universe behaves. Memory of what has already happened, so we don't mistake the middle for the beginning or the narrowing for the end. James Webb is memory infrastructure on a civilizational scale. It is us choosing not to forget the universe's youth while we still can see it. That choice implies another one whether to treat understanding as an endpoint or as a relay. If intelligence is temporary and all evidence suggests it often is, then the only way meaning persists is through transmission. Knowledge passed forward, context preserved across generations that will never meet their ancestors. This is not about legacy. It's about continuity of awareness. A universe that began crowded and will end isolated doesn't care about monuments. It erases them eventually. What survives longest are patterns, behaviors that can be reconstructed, principles that can be rediscovered, understandings that can be reassembled even if the original minds are gone. James Webb contributes to that pattern set. It locks in one crucial truth scale arrived early, everywhere, and fast. Future intelligence, human or otherwise, will not have to guess that. It will be part of the inherited context. And that may be the most consequential thing we ever do. Not building faster engines, not reaching farther first, but accurately describing the environment intelligence exists in. Because misunderstandings at scale are lethal in slow motion. A species that believes the universe is static will overbuild locally and underprepare for isolation. A species that believes complexity is rare will hoard meaning and waste opportunity. A species that believes it is central will plan poorly. James Webb dismantles all three illusions at once. It shows a universe that is dynamic, abundant, and indifferent to position. That doesn't make it hostile. It makes it honest. And honesty is a gift intelligence doesn't always receive early enough. We are receiving it now. That doesn't guarantee anything. But it creates a possibility that didn't exist before intelligence, that grows up understanding the real scale of its environment instead of discovering it too late. We are still very young by cosmic standards. But we are no longer naive. And that shift from naive to informed is often the difference between a brief spark and a sustained presence. The universe will continue expanding either way. Galaxies will continue drifting. Stars will continue burning. James Webb will eventually fall silent. But the understanding it delivered does not have to. If intelligence treats this moment not as a triumph, but as an initiation into a universe that demands patience, humility, and long-term coherence, then scale stops being an existential threat. It becomes a guide that says this is how large the system is, or this is how it behaves. This is the timescale that matters. Act accordingly. We don't know if intelligence elsewhere has already learned this lesson. We don't know if anyone ever does. But for the first time, here, now, we're in a position to try, informed by evidence that reaches back to the universe's earlier successes. James Webb didn't make the universe larger. It made our understanding of it finally match reality. And that alignment between perception and truth is the quiet foundation of every enduring system we know. The universe didn't need us to see this. But now that we have, pretending otherwise is no longer an option. The scale has been revealed. The context is set. What remains is not discovery, but choice about how intelligence behaves once it finally understands how big the game actually is. Choice is the last thing scale allows. Not because the universe takes it away, but because once you see clearly, pretending you didn't is no longer possible. James Webb didn't force a decision on us. It removed the comfort of ignorance, and that is often enough to change the trajectory of a civilization. Before Webb, we could imagine the early universe as tentative, sparse, slowly assembling itself like a careful draft. That image allowed us to believe we were still near the beginning, that the biggest structures, the biggest stories, might still be ahead of us. Webb erased that illusion. The universe didn't wait, it didn't hesitate, it didn't practice. It committed. Massive galaxies existed almost immediately. Structure was not a late refinement. It was the opening move, and everything that followed: stars, planets, chemistry, life, intelligence unfolded inside a system that had already decided how large it was willing to be. That reframes our era in a way that's easy to miss. We are not living during the universe's expansion into scale. We are living during its reckoning with scale. The scaffolding is built. The distances are set. The isolation has already begun. What remains is not growth, but navigation. And navigation requires maps. James Webb is the first honest map of the terrain intelligence actually inhabits. Not a comforting one, not a heroic one, an accurate one. It shows us that the universe is not organized around observers. Observers arise inside it briefly, like eddies in a vast current. Some persist for a while, most fade without leaving a trace beyond their local surroundings. That doesn't make awareness futile. It makes it conditional. And conditions matter. In a universe where scale arrives early and isolation increases over time, intelligence that treats itself as the destination will fail. Intelligence that treats itself as a carrier of memory, of understanding, of perspective has a chance. Not a guarantee, a chance. That distinction is everything. Because scale doesn't promise fairness. It only promises consistency. The same rules applied to the first galaxies apply to us. The same expansion that carries their light to us will eventually carry our signals into silence. We are not exempt. Which brings us to the deepest emotional turn of this entire journey: acceptance without resignation. Acceptance says the universe is vast, accelerating, indifferent, and already past its most crowded phase. Resignation would say then nothing matters. But those are not the same conclusion, because meaning was never provided by the universe. It was always constructed locally, temporarily, by systems capable of caring. James Webb doesn't remove that ability. It contextualizes it. It tells us care exists inside a system that does not revolve around it. So care must be chosen deliberately, protected intentionally, and extended across time if it's going to matter beyond a single moment. That's not a burden, it's clarity. Think about what Webb actually does, mechanically. It collects ancient photons, light that left its source when the universe was young, crossed expanding space for billions of years, and arrived here precisely because nothing intervened to stop it. No intelligence guided it, no purpose aimed it. Yet here it is decoded, interpreted, woven into a story by minds that didn't exist when it began its journey. That alone is extraordinary. It means meaning can arise after the fact. Meaning does not have to be planned into the universe. It can be retroactively applied by awareness. And that changes how endings work. The universe may trend toward isolation, toward darkness, toward silence. But silence is not the same as absence of meaning. It is absence of witnesses. As long as witnesses exist, Meaning can be generated not forever, but long enough to justify the process that created them. James Webb increases the density of meaning by increasing the depth of context. It allows us to situate ourselves not at the centre, not at the edge, but somewhere honest, late enough to reflect, early enough to act. That combination is rare. Most systems never get it. They arise too early, without enough structure to support awareness. Or too late, when access to the past is gone. We are in between, and in between moments are unstable. They can tip toward continuity or collapse, toward humility or hubris, toward adaptation or denial. Webb doesn't choose for us. It simply removes the excuse of not knowing. We now know the universe was already enormous when it was young. We now know complexity arrived fast and everywhere. We now know expansion will continue, separating regions beyond contact. We now know this era of visibility is temporary. Knowing that changes the ethical landscape of intelligence. Not ethics as rules, ethics as orientation. What do you build when you know the sky is not permanent? What do you preserve when you know access is shrinking? What stories do you tell when you know the universe does not privilege your species, your planet, or your moment? James Webb doesn't answer those questions. It makes them unavoidable. And here is the quiet closure forming beneath all this escalation. The universe does not demand that intelligence succeed. It allows it to try. That allowance is not generous or cruel. It's neutral. And neutrality is what gives choice its weight. We are not important because we are rare. We are important because we are aware. Aware enough to see the system clearly. Aware enough to understand that scale is not a metaphor. Aware enough to realize that the universe has already shown us how it treats everything that cannot adapt to long-term conditions. The early universe Webb reveals is not a mystery box. It's a case study, a demonstration of what works at scale and what doesn't. Fast assembly works. Coherent structure works. Alignment with underlying forces works. Fragility doesn't. Short-term thinking doesn't. Assuming centrality doesn't. Those lessons were written in galaxies before intelligence ever existed. Now intelligence is reading them, and reading implies response. Not immediately, not dramatically, but inevitably. James Webb is not the end of our cosmic story. It's the moment the story stopped being local, the moment our self-image expanded to match the environment we actually occupy. From here on, pretending the universe is small is no longer innocence. It's a choice, and choices made in ignorance can be forgiven. Choices made with full context shape legacies. We don't know what intelligence elsewhere has done with this realization. We don't know if anyone ever survives long enough to see how the universe truly ends. But we do know this. For the first time, in this place, at this moment, awareness has been given an honest view of the scale it inhabits. Not exaggerated, not minimized, revealed. And once revealed, scale doesn't ask us to be heroic. It asks us to be appropriate. Appropriate to time, appropriate to distance, appropriate to fragility, appropriate to the fact that meaning exists not because the universe cares, but because intelligence decides to care anyway. James Webb didn't make the universe meaningful. It showed us the conditions under which meaning must now operate. The universe will keep expanding. The galaxies will keep drifting. The light will keep traveling until it doesn't. What happens inside that flow whether awareness persists, adapts, and carries forward what it has learned is no longer a question of discovery. It's a question of response. And that question is now fully, unmistakably, ours. Response is slower than reaction. Reaction flares, response endures, and a universe this large filters ruthlessly between the two. James Webb didn't reveal the true scale of the universe to provoke panic or triumph. It revealed it to force maturity, the kind that arrives when a system realizes it is not early, not central, and not guaranteed continuity. What happens after that realization is the real test. Most systems, when confronted with scale, retreat into distraction. They zoom inward, they argue over details, they mistake refinement for progress, It's a defensive move, shrink the problem until it fits familiar instincts. Webb does the opposite. It stretches the problem until instincts fail. By showing us galaxies that existed when the universe was barely awake, it removes the comforting idea that we're witnessing something new. By showing us density where we expected emptiness, it removes the fantasy that the universe was waiting for us to arrive. By showing us abundance everywhere we look, it removes the notion that complexity is fragile or rare. What remains is a stark environment, a universe that builds quickly, separates relentlessly, and remembers nothing unless something inside it chooses to remember. That is the terrain intelligence now operates on, and terrain determines tactics. In a small universe, response would mean expansion, reach outward, claim space, spread influence. In a universe like this, expansion is a trap. It increases exposure without increasing cohesion. It stretches systems thinner precisely when distance is becoming the dominant threat. Webb makes that clear without saying it. Look at the galaxies that survived. The oldest, most persistent ones are not thin. They are deep. They have dense cores, massive halos, internal redundancy. They didn't outrun the universe. They anchored themselves within it. Response at cosmic scale is about anchoring. Anchoring knowledge, anchoring awareness, anchoring continuity against the slow pull of separation. That's not poetic language, it's literal. As expansion accelerates, the amount of accessible universe for any observer shrinks. Future intelligence will inherit a sky with fewer galaxies, less evidence, less context. Without intervention, without preservation, the story of the universe collapses into a local myth. James Webb interrupts that collapse. It doesn't just gather data, it compresses context. It ensures that early density, early abundance, early speed are not lost to cosmic drift. It turns a fleeting era of visibility into something that can be carried forward. That act, choosing to preserve context before it vanishes, is the first truly scale-aware behavior intelligence has demonstrated. Not conquest, not domination, preservation, and preservation is the response that matches this universe. Because scale doesn't need to be beaten, it needs to be navigated. Now bring this back to the human frame not as philosophy, but as position. You are alive during a brief interval when the universe is still legible, when the early chapters can still be read directly instead of inferred indirectly, when the scaffolding of reality hasn't yet disappeared beyond the horizon. That interval will close, not in our lifetime, but inevitably. And what survives that closing will not be cities or monuments or even species. It will be records, understandings, maps of context, knowledge that allows future awareness whatever form it takes to situate itself honestly inside the system. Without that, intelligence resets to myth. With it, intelligence inherits continuity. James Webb is continuity technology. It doesn't solve problems, it prevents amnesia, and amnesia is the real extinction at cosmic scale. Because systems can rebuild from ruins. They cannot rebuild from ignorance. This is why the phrase "we were wrong" matters so much. Not because previous models failed, failure is part of science, but because being wrong about scale leads to misaligned priorities. If we believed the universe was sparse early, we could imagine ourselves near the beginning. If we believed complexity was slow, we could imagine plenty of time. If we believed isolation was distant, we could postpone response. Webb removes all three assumptions at once. Early abundance, rapid complexity, inevitable isolation. That combination compresses urgency without hysteria. It says there is time, but not for denial. Response doesn't require panic. It requires orientation. Orientation toward long time scales. Orientation toward preservation. Orientation toward coherence rather than expansion. This is where the story finally slows, not because momentum is gone, but because clarity has arrived. The universe is not asking intelligence to be heroic. It is asking intelligence to be appropriate. Appropriate to a system that scales early and forgets quickly. Appropriate to the fact that awareness is temporary, but understanding can be transmitted. appropriate to the reality that meaning is not stored in stars or galaxies, but in the interpretations intelligence builds from them. James Webb is an interpreter. It translates ancient light into present awareness. And in doing so, it hands intelligence a mirror not of itself, but of the environment it occupies. You cannot unsee that mirror. You cannot unknow that the universe was already vast before Earth existed. You cannot unknow that the window of visibility is closing. You cannot unknow that intelligence now carries responsibility for its own context. This isn't about destiny. It's about posture. A posture that says we understand where we are, and understanding where you are is the prerequisite for any meaningful response. The universe will not congratulate us for that. It won't notice, but intelligence will, and that internal recognition that shift from small stories to honest ones is the moment a system stops being naive. James Webb didn't give us answers about how the universe ends. It gave us the conditions under which endings become irrelevant. What matters is not the final state. What matters is whether awareness aligns with reality while it still can, whether it chooses coherence over spectacle, memory over noise, depth over sprawl. This is not the climax. It's stabilization. The moment when a story that could have dissolved into awe instead resolves into orientation. We know the scale now. We know it arrived early. We know it's accelerating. We know isolation is coming. And we know intelligence exists inside that flow briefly, precariously, but meaningfully. From here forward, everything depends not on what the universe does, but on how awareness responds to finally seeing the universe as it actually is. Not small, not waiting, already immense, already moving, and indifferent to whether we were ready to know that or not. That indifference is not cruelty. It's clarity, and clarity, at this scale, is the rarest gift intelligence will ever receive. We have it now. The question is not whether the universe will remember us. It won't. The question is whether intelligence will remember the universe accurately and carry that memory forward long enough to matter at all. Memory only matters if it survives the handoff. A thought unshared vanishes. A record unmaintained decays. A civilization that understands scale but fails to transmit that understanding forward might as well never have learned it at all. James Webb didn't just give us a view of the universe's past. It revealed how easily the past can disappear if nothing actively carries it. This is where the story stops expanding outward and finally turns back toward the present moment, not as reflection, but as convergence. Because all along, scale has been doing something subtle, compressing responsibility. When the universe felt small, responsibility felt optional. When the universe felt static, it felt postponable. Now that the universe feels vast, fast, and indifferent, responsibility becomes unavoidable. Not moral responsibility to the cosmos, but structural responsibility to continuity. James Webb doesn't ask us to care. It shows us what happens if we don't. Look again at those early galaxies blazing, massive, overachieving against expectation. Most of them are gone now, merged, cannibalized, stretched thin by expansion. Their light reaches us, but their identities do not. They contributed to structure, then dissolved into larger systems. Their existence mattered, but not in the way individuality matters to us. The universe remembers through transformation, not preservation. Intelligence remembers through intention. That difference is everything. Because if intelligence does not choose to preserve context, scale guarantees it will be erased, not violently, not dramatically, quietly, by distance, by time, by the slow loss of access to origins. James Webb is a counterforce to that erasure, not permanently, but decisively. It captures a snapshot of the universe's youth before it slips fully beyond reach, and by doing so, it sets a precedent awareness can intervene in the forgetting process. Not to stop it, to slow it, to leave markers, to say, to whoever comes next, human or otherwise, this is what the universe was like before it became unreachable. That act changes the meaning of intelligence. Intelligence is no longer just something that adapts. It becomes something that archives. And archiving at cosmic scale is not about storing facts. It's about preserving orientation, preserving the understanding that the universe was already enormous when it was young, already crowded, already fast, preserving the awareness that scale is not a late surprise but an original condition. Without that awareness, future intelligence risks misreading its environment. It might mistake isolation for emptiness, quiet skies for a quiet past, local scarcity for universal rarity. And from those misunderstandings, it might build fragile stories that collapse under pressure. James Webb prevents that collapse not forever, but long enough to matter. Now feel the closing arc of this journey. We began by destabilizing intuition by showing that the universe was bigger, earlier, and faster than we thought. We escalated through abundance, repetition, chance, time, intelligence, consequence, belief, response, and memory. Not as concepts, but as pressures. And all of it converges here at the moment where awareness realizes that seeing clearly is not the end of the story. It's the handoff point. The universe doesn't require intelligence to do this, but intelligence that understands scale and fails to act on that understanding wastes the rarest alignment it will ever experience. We are aligned right now, aligned with evidence, aligned with access, aligned with timing. That alignment is temporary, and temporary alignments are where all meaningful transitions happen. James Webb is not a monument, it's a bridge. A bridge between a universe that was and a universe that will be carrying information across a gap that is widening every second. One day that bridge will end, but what crosses it now can echo far beyond its lifespan. Which brings us to the final emotional resolution, not despair, not triumph, but inclusion. We are small, but we are included. Included in a universe that did not wait for us, but allowed us to notice it anyway. Included in a process that scaled beyond comprehension before we ever existed, yet left behind signals patient enough to be read. Included in a brief era when awareness can still look both backward and forward with clarity. James Webb didn't make us important. It made us relevant. Relevant because we exist at a moment when the universe can still be known directly. Relevant because we can still correct our myths before they calcify. Relevant because we can still choose to align our long-term behavior with the environment we actually inhabit. The universe doesn't care if we do this, but intelligence does. And intelligence, once it understands scale, no longer gets to pretend that forgetting is neutral. Forgetting is a choice. So is remembering. So is transmitting. So is responding. The true scale of the universe is not just measured in light years or galaxies. It is measured in how much context can be carried forward before access collapses. James Webb expanded that capacity. What happens next determines whether that expansion becomes a turning point or a footnote. We often ask whether the universe has meaning. Webb quietly answers a different question. Does intelligence understand the universe well enough to create meaning that survives beyond itself? That is not guaranteed. But it is now possible, and possibility, at this scale, is never evenly distributed. It clusters. It appears early. It fades. We are standing inside one of those clusters now. Aware, oriented, no longer guessing about how big the universe is. No longer pretending scale is abstract. No longer waiting for permission to take the environment seriously. The universe is vast. It was vast early. It will remain vast long after we're gone. That truth does not diminish us. It defines the context in which anything we do can matter at all. James Webb didn't just reveal the universe. It revealed the terms under which awareness exists inside it. And now, with no more illusions left to shed, the story doesn't need to escalate. It needs to conclude, not with answers, but with orientation. We are here. The universe is already immense. It is already moving. It is already forgetting. And for a brief, unlikely moment, intelligence has seen that clearly. What it does with that clarity is the only part of this story that isn't written in the stars. It's written in response. We don't end at the edge of the universe. We end inside it, placed, oriented, finally honest about where we stand. James Webb did not give us a bigger number. It gave us a different posture, a way of standing inside reality without leaning on comforting illusions. The illusion that the universe was waiting. The illusion that scale arrived slowly. The illusion that we were early enough to define the story. Those are gone now. What remains is quieter, heavier, and strangely complete. The universe was already immense when it was young, already crowded with galaxies, already efficient at turning matter into structure, already moving faster than our intuitions could handle. And it did all of that without observers, without meaning, without narrative. Then, much later, awareness appeared. Not as a goal, as a consequence. And that awareness eventually learned how to look back far enough to see just how much had already happened without it. That is the moment we are living in. Not the beginning of the universe's story, not the climax, but the moment when the universe becomes knowable to something inside it briefly, imperfectly, but truthfully. James Webb is the instrument of that moment. It does not make us large. It does not make us central. It does not make us safe. It makes us situated. And being situated is enough. Enough to stop pretending the sky is small. Enough to stop acting like time is generous. Enough to stop confusing progress with motion. Enough to understand that scale is not an enemy, it is the environment. The universe will continue expanding. That is settled. Galaxies will drift beyond reach. That is settled. Light will stop arriving from the deep past. That is settled. Most of what exists will never be known by us. That was always settled. But meaning was never the universe's job. Meaning happens locally, when awareness meets context and chooses to care anyway. James Webb gave us context at maximum depth. It showed us that the universe did not crawl into complexity. It leapt, that it did not assemble timidly. It committed, that what we thought was the beginning was already well underway. And in doing so, it resolved something quietly but decisively. We were not wrong because we underestimated a number. We were wrong because we underestimated inevitability. Inevitability of scale, inevitability of abundance, inevitability of isolation. And yet within that inevitability awareness exists. You exist. Right now, as a configuration of matter that can feel the weight of billions of years without being crushed by them. That can imagine distances it will never cross. That can understand a universe that does not need to be understood. That alone is extraordinary. Not because it changes the universe, but because it changes how existence feels inside it. The final closure is not an answer. It's a settling into the truth that we are late but not too late. Small but not excluded. Temporary but not irrelevant. We are alive during the brief interval when the universe's early scale is still visible and its future trajectory is already clear. When light from the first galaxies still reaches us. When understanding is possible before access collapses. That interval will end. But it has not ended yet. And while it lasts, intelligence has one quiet, profound task to align itself with reality instead of fantasy. To carry forward an accurate memory of the universe it inhabits. To act as if scale is real, time is deep, and isolation is coming without panic, without despair, without denial. James Webb does not demand awe. Awe is the side effect. What it demands is recognition. Recognition that the universe did not grow up around us. Recognition that it does not bend to our stories. Recognition that our stories must now bend to it. And when that recognition finally lands, something stabilizes. The fear drains out. The urgency sharpens. The noise falls away. You stop asking whether the universe cares. You start asking whether awareness can be worthy of the clarity it has been given. Not worthy in a moral sense. Worthy in a structural one. Can it remember accurately? Can it plan coherently? Can it transmit context forward instead of letting it dissolve? Can it behave like it understands the scale of the stage it's on? Those questions don't end the story. They complete it. Because a story does not need eternity to be whole. It needs alignment. And for the first time, alignment is possible. We are not standing at the edge of the universe. We are standing at the edge of illusion. Beyond it is a universe that is larger than we thought, faster than we expected, and already far past the point of waiting for us. And yet here we are, seeing it, feeling it, included, not by design, but by chance and persistence and the stubborn travel of light across billions of years. James Webb didn't reveal the true scale of the universe to make us feel small. It revealed it so we could finally feel oriented, so that when we look up or back or forward, we do so without lies. The universe is immense. It always was. It always will be. And for a brief, unlikely moment inside that immensity, awareness has opened its eyes wide enough to know it. That is not the end. That is closure. And it is enough.